This and all talks at the 2019 JavaScript for WordPress Conference are brought to you in part by our sponsors Pantheon, a high-performance hosting platform with agile developer tools. Check them out at pantheon.io.
Hi, awesome. We're happy to have you all here. We have Tammie. She's taking a less technical track, and she's going to be talking on being brave. Are we all ready?
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So today I'm going to be talking about being brave. So what is brave? Well, bravery means different things to different people. What comes into your mind, for example, when you think about being brave? Is it of someone saving someone? Or is it of someone pushing the boundaries of what they could have done before? Perhaps it's just someone doing something they thought that they weren't able to do before. So this is the definition of bravery. And courage is also inexplicably linked to this. Bravery is different for each person. And we measure bravery by our own gauge, where there are also levels of bravery that each person has. And it's seen as positive. It's a positive thing to be brave. People are congratulated when they show it. And bravery is something to be praised. Words like valor and fearlessness champion those that show bravery. I wondered in all of this whether bravery was coming out of fashion. In this day and age, you possibly would think that. And whilst not a real robust data point to use to really base a theory on, this graph of the use of the word bravery in books from Google, I found really, really interesting. As mentioned, there are lots of different levels of bravery. And it's maybe easy to jump to the biggest ones when we think about this. Bravery could be asking for a raise. It could be creating something. It could be a small act, or it could actually be a large one. Without bravery, though, there is no progress. It takes someone to make that first step, that first brave step. The fear of even being judged often gets in the way of bravery. This limits, this restricts, and this confines not just people, but projects and entire generations. We learn the foundations of bravery through play. If you are fearful of play, then you limit that bravery and that growth. Without play, without just exploring, there really is no good performance. So children, when they play, that's a rehearsal, a space that they experiment and they test boundaries in. They learn and they discover the world. Curious minds explore the possibilities and they find the consequences of those in a safe environment of play. As adults, that fades. It's distilled by our rigid minds, our stuck notions of reality, and the idea that only fools play. Judgment weighs on people and it crushes our imagination and limiting what could be. When we're young, we're taught to colour inside the lines. It's those that colour outside the lines, though, that really get to push the boundaries of the world. The projects we work on, those limit with their lines and they confine the tools, the regulations, the processes. Each is a hurdle to experimentation, to growth, and a threat to that project's future. Exclusion isn't bravery, though. I really want to be clear about that. Thinking just inside your headspace and colouring in the lines is not brave at all. Thinking for the 1%, that's not brave. Creating just for today, that isn't brave. All of these things will limit, they will confine, and again, they're going to ultimately result in lack of growth. So there's a question, are we brave as humans? Well, the reality is, if it wasn't for brave humans, we'd never be where we are today. And that's sort of how nature and evolution works. Yes, our amygdala-fueled brain leans us towards change aversion, but really at the core of all of it, bravery is what got us here as a species, and it's what's going to keep us going. Bravery also isn't a clear-cut binary thing. There can be blocks to even the most brave souls. There is a privilege in being brave. You need support. You need ground that is fertile, an opportunity. You need access often, if you're creating, to even the tools or positions needed to take that brave leap. You may need time, and you may need far more than someone actually has at that point. Situation is often an agent of bravery. There also needs to be a dose of reality when we're talking about bravery. To be brave without thinking of consequence is rash and selfish. The bravery that really moves us forward is the bravery of consideration regarding impacts, because ethics and inclusion don't have to take a back seat to brave. It's a drink, you could say, to sip and not drown in. Pushing forward then needs a time of stability, growth, and assurance to bolster it once you've had that brave time. So in this talk, I want to talk about bravery in terms of creating. And I'm going to look specifically at how you can and should be more brave in the work that you do. How WordPress really itself as a project needs to be brave. Because if we don't, the future is uncertain and a lot less bountiful. Bravery, though, isn't something you can do once and be done. It's about a mindset. And the type of bravery I'm talking about here isn't running into a burning building. It's about daring, having the courage to color outside the lines. It's about practicing bravery in our craft, and from that, creating a culture that is really pushing the boundaries of what we do. And what if? So if you were to think, or if I were to think of a guide to being brave and how to do that in your work, I would probably distill it down to a few points, and I've done that here today. First, it's about knowing the boundaries. After all, if you're going to cut outside the lines, you need to know where the lines are. This could involve thinking outside the process or outside what is possible today. Outside is a mindset, and knowing your own boundaries is also part of this. Being able to level up what you don't know and pair, and don't be afraid to learn with other people and learn by yourself and take that time to really know those boundaries. And once you know, you can start to push. It's crucial to also have an experimental mindset, to be okay with things going wrong and things not working. Experimentation leads to discovery. I want you for a moment just to have a little bit of a think. When was the last time you created something just because? Probably quite a long time ago, right? Think again of all the progresses in technology. Most got there through experimentation. And practicing this type of experimentation leads to discovery. It's how you move forward. If you're a creator, maybe it's how you find your next project. So time is also critical to bravery. And this could be time to experiment or time to just educate. Making time each week, be it a few hours or even a day, for that time to live that laboratory mindset, that's really how you get to free yourself and explore. This could be seen a little bit as finding your bat cave, your space to create, to think what if, to dream beyond. If you think of a camp or a pillow fort that a kid has, it's a space of possibilities. Maker spaces are the adult versions of these. And how do you actually create your own physical or virtual space yourself? It's worth also noting it doesn't have to be a shed physically at the bottom of your garden. It could be a shed in your mind. It could be virtual. This mind shed is where you go and where you create. Play is also so important. Having space to create with the purity of play, having your own sandbox, these points all tie in together, because being brave is about setting those right conditions. Because it's a long time likely since you last sat down and you just played freely without setting a goal or focusing on the deliverable. That's just the way it is. And bravery doesn't have to start big. Start small. If you're limited on time, fine, start small there too. Little steps in bravery can make larger ones and can lead to larger ones as you grow in confidence. And maybe it's about learning something new. Maybe you do that thing for 15 minutes a day and you build it up incrementally. Or maybe it starts with setting aside one afternoon a month to play. See how far you can take something. Just experience. You can expect to have the freedom of experimental play if you set these rigid, high goals to stick to and aim for every single time. That's why starting small eases you in. It's practice. And being brave is a mindset you want to become a habit. To be brave in your work, you need feedback. The phrase release early, release often not only sets the stage for this, but it creates a space for fluidity within production. Having a culture of feedback also allows growth, but it takes cultivating, nurturing, and growth. Without feedback, you're never going to grow as a creator. It has to also be feedback, not judgment. Feedback you can build on. Judgment, you can only have feelings about. And you can't be brave without being inspired. I wanted to take a little time today to share some work that's inspired me and drives me to create things. Because inspiration is the fuel of experimentation. And for me, that often comes in the form of experiences or art. I wanted to share in this 2 sources of inspiration for me right now. And I would love, after this talk, to find out what really inspires you as well. It's important to note that not everything has to be tangible. Inspiration comes in all shapes and forms. You can be inspired on a walk, with a piece of music, seeing a flower, a story, or a work of art. So this is Miracles and Miracles, and I'm going to provide a slide link at the end so you can grab all these links. And this combines AR with drawings and sculptures. There's an incredible video that I would encourage you to check out with the site that's linked here. Drawings come alive through screens, flowing and moving. Little figures dance across rocks and balance over stones. There's a sense of delight in this work. The static images come alive through technology. And Team Lab, I'm not sure if you've heard of these, but it's an art collective that creates experiences that are totally immersive. They explore a new relationship between humans and nature, between oneself and the world through art. I was lucky enough to experience planets and recently a video piece in the Barbican. This is an experience that completely moves. To be able to create these experiences that touch this deep, this whole, whilst yes, this is an art piece, you can take this into the work that you create. You can take that emotion, that immersiveness, and translate it, for example, into an application, the experience of writing or the experience of editing a photo. So that's how to be brave yourself. I want to take a little bit of a look at the wider work of a project. How did we get to where we are today in technology and in WordPress? Well, we didn't get there by not being brave. WordPress as a project had a lot of ground untrodden to grow from what it was to what it is today. This gave the opportunity for bravery, for exploration. There were even in some cases no lines to actually color within. And it's easy to be brave when nothing matters, when it's all an experiment. A lot of WordPress has been shaped by experimentation, by brave thoughts of what if. Plugins have tried something different and they've explored that. And patches have tried to just see what if. And many features grew from a passion, an idea that someone had and took to the project. And that idea grew into reality. Open source itself moves forward through these experiments. It doesn't move ahead through cautious lack of bravery. Even the idea of open source is pretty brave when faced with the majority of the world. The idea of our community within WordPress even functioning is a brave one. And Gutenberg, as far as phase 1, is the past now, because it's been grown and it's happened. It was a brave idea seed, created through experimentation. This was done in the open, and to experiment in the open really takes some bravery. Feedback comes in all shapes when you do this type of work. During Gutenberg phase 1, there were many what-if moments. Play led to trying things that just hadn't been done before. And creation was done with a curious mind and open to pushing beyond what was before. This is how we got to where we are today. But that's the past. What about the present? Today, our situation is a space we've got to through bravery, experimentation, and a passion for the project. How, though, can we get to the future? At times, it feels like we're stuck, static. Our brain freezes because of too much. We're in overload. There's been this arms race of tooling, a snowstorm of change, and a space we're in seems confusing, antagonistic, and complicated. In times like this, we drown in nostalgia. It's not a time to be brave. It's a time to batten down our mental hatches and soothe our amygdala. Everything is big. Everything is too important. Deadlines mount, and the paralysis of options is the mode of work for many in this space. What if, though? Bear with me on this. Rather than being at a peak, rather than being stuck, we're actually at a cliff edge that we could jump and soar. But are we brave enough to take that leap? Our tools bind us in the work that we do. They are the line enforcers that we color in. They've created this paralyzing space where it's easier to process out the same work than dream beyond. Creating today can make you feel like you were cast adrift on a sea of processes. A prime example of this feeling is even setting up a local development environment. Whilst the setup screen can often be super fun if you want to pretend that you're a hacker while you run it, one slight issue and it falls down again. The technology we depend on seems shockingly fragile and so cryptic to fix that it inevitably does break. Even the process of committing has become so high, it often leads to confusion. An example of this is Travis on a GitHub project. And whilst that can absolutely be amazing when it works as it checks our commits, but when it doesn't, debugging the cryptic messages is similar to reading ancient texts. If you're able to commit, then you should be able to understand how to fix what you break, because all too often that's not the case. We shouldn't be forcing people out of being able to commit because of overly complicated processes. We should make it easier for more to be included. So many of us have also stopped blogging, stopped writing. The one space of our dreams and theories now lies vacant with a last year post a year ago of must blog more. We've all got those posts. Maybe we made an excuse that we will update the theme and then suddenly be able to blog. Or we're just ignoring it, hoping that it's going to go away. Through posts, we used to share ideas. We used to dare to dream. And it all got a little too serious, too fearful that every single word mattered, that every single word is going to be analyzed and you'll be held up to it. The same goes for code pens and design experiments. These are confined to our best work. Nobody shows their sketchbooks anymore because all too many assumptions get made and blog posts are hooked into as being the only way, ignoring that it's just an idea, a flotsam of the mind. We are scared to share because everything is a big deal. In a climate like this, what is created becomes predictable, stifled, and limited. Safe becomes a style and suffocation of creativity the process. There is a fear of deviation, a fear of standing out. Ideas are analyzed with magnifying glasses and pitchforks. And why would you actually create if your space feels like that? You wouldn't. It's easier, safer, and a lot less traumatic to just toe the line, to color in the lines. And it seems like not a day, even an hour goes past without some new amazing framework or outstanding technique that you just have to try. Post stream past social media on this breakthrough. This amazing new hotness, the oh my wow, this just changes everything. It feels like we're all stuck in some next framework idol popularity contest. And in all this excitement, all this wonder, haven't we forgotten something? What about the users? What about the users experiencing the product? What about those learning to create? There are many users and we're failing them all in many, many, many different ways that we can prevent. In all this process, we forgot about what matters, those users. And we're caught up in this. And while we are caught up in this, they learn the way of processes and are forced into accepting experiences. They shout their frustrations in one room, while most of us are in the other room having our minds blown by a process. This has to change. When that happens, we can start to truly create experiences that are what users want, deserve, and need. That aren't created just for our headspace, our friends, our colleagues, and bubble. That are inclusive and actually enable those that use them. WordPress of today is weighed down by history, by track legacy and a mindset of the WordPress way. This blinkers even the most enthusiastic, passionate contributor. You colour in the lines because there's just so much to do. It's just easier to do that. New ground seems non-existent. Everything feels like there's already a solution. And if it feels like that, why would you boundary push when there is no space to push into? There's too much to do, and that clouds innovation and creative thought. But there are such shiny glimmers. There are people coming to this fresh in the project, and there are people starting questioning the WordPress way. These are the seeds of bravery. The Gutenberg of today, well, that's a huge, daunting repo. Finding new ground can seem impossible when you first come across it. Where do you start? Maintenance is mounting up in vast, towering stacks, overshadowing any space, or it feels like it's overshadowing any space to create or experiment. But like the seeds in WordPress, there's a light. There are people who are showing the way. Gutenberg has created a foundation that is enabling people to explore in brave and exciting ways. There are plugins sprouting up with layers and leaves of potential. Nimble, free to think, what if, and play with the new toys available. This is the present, but a path to the future. And I may have painted it a little bit bleak at the present, but it isn't untruly the space we're in. There is hope, these nimble minds and free expressions of that hope. There are tools, often too many tools and not the right ones, but there is a foundation, an environment that could, if we are able and we are aware, lead to incredible, exciting, brave growth. The mindset really does have to shift to being one of going back to the lab, to discover the paths and explore them. We need, in doing that, to myth bust the WordPress way and to look at what the future ways could be. We don't go as a project accepting that what we know now is the only route forward. That's not the way ahead. Creating a lab means creating a space for experimenting, a nurturing, supporting community that accepts not everything is fully baked, one that is okay seeing cookie dough and first pancakes, one that gives feedback, not judgment, that has enough structure to encourage growth, but not so much that it's paralyzed by hierarchy and blows that flame of hope out with process. A collective focused on what could be. And our tools need to be rooted in play. Contribution should be grown through play, not through wading through processes and documentation. It all just needs to be fun again. Applications like Glitch show a glimmer of what this could be, a space where experimentation, remixing is the mindset. As a project, we could learn so much from this. How do we actually make contribution fun again? How do we grow through play? One tiny little brave step recently was taken by the design team with the Design Experiments plugin. This here is shown that you don't have to be an individual to do this. Sometimes it's scary, so scary to be brave alone. By being collectively brave, you can start to really see what if. This plugin has a series of things that were either talked about in a Slack conversation or in some dusty track tickets, and it's now being made real. It's designed to not be used in production, to always be experimental. No weight, no expectations, but all the freedom to just see. And going back and forth in theory only gets you so far if you're conversing. There is something powerful in just trying, just doing. This type of plugin really allows that to see what just happens when people try, when that conversation turns into action. To get to the future, I really feel that one point needs to be underlined. We don't get there by clinging to job titles or judging those that step between or that are Swiss Army knives. Developers should be allowed to experiment in design, and designers, if they want, they should be allowed to code. No matter what you do, an experiment should be given feedback, never judged, on its own merit, not on the background of the person. Now, this is really easier to be said than done, but we've not got this far by drawing lines around roles and a territorial mindset. In fact, when we've done that, we've regressed and we've caused limits and we've had problems. The future can be incredibly bright, but we get there by less close groups, more open sharing, less conversations, and more do. We get there by letting anyone play in the sandbox and create castles. Like many, I learned to code by following the example of others, viewing their source and making connections. I remember starting to discover writing themes for WordPress and learning by the example of Kubrick. It was simple, it was open code that I could easily access and understand. I learned by connecting the dots together, finding those paths. When I learned design, the tools were simple. You just opened and used them. There was no design system, no framework, or no complex thinking. Countless people have learned to work this way. You're likely amongst them too. I wonder though, if I was starting today, would I be able to learn so easily? The flip side of this is that a system that really, really enables this kind of fast, rapid, and those benefits. A good design system actually does that. A good process actually does that. And we need those good processes to go forward. Because I asked a question here, and I want you to think about this. How can you process and learn when you do so within a bubble? We work within a bubble of the work that we create ourselves, our environment. We work within the bubble of WordPress. And it's cozy, certainly, but this bubble thinking only stalls, and it causes growth problems. It's a basic lesson learned, but one we all too easily forget when we're caught up in the new or when we're fearful. Within the bubble grows a state of acceptance. The steep learning curve is sometimes seen, and I've seen this, and I know you have, as a rite of passage over a problem that actually needs fixing. The complicated language hurdle becomes the norm, and blinkered thinking is standard. It seems almost like the web itself is being split into two lands with really high, difficult borders to scale, rather than the fluid universe of discovery it was meant to be. It's bad enough for those of us that live in this state, but meanwhile, users live in another universe completely, outside any bubble, out of mind. So I want to, in the last part of this talk, share some of my own brave thoughts. And I share these not as unique things that only I think, because human nature means that others are going to be thinking the same. I share them because after talking about bravery, it's a pretty good time to share them. So the devices of today are not those of tomorrow. What we create for today isn't going to be what we create for tomorrow. We can guess, but we really, really don't know. If you're limiting your experience to just one device, you also limit your mind to what you can create. Play comes in using different platforms and different devices. Explore. Change up your phone. Start exploring what is coming up. Make yourself aware of the changing space. And similarly, the situations and use cases we create for today, they're not the ones of tomorrow either. Looking to explorations in wearables and future thinking is where maybe you can start to see what could be. As creators, playing and exploring these is crucial to really grow into that future. Don't focus on the new shiny of the year or the next. Look beyond to what is coming up. So Fig Lab, or Future Interfaces Group, it's a research lab within the Human Computer Interaction Institute of the Carnegie Mellon University. And this is just one of the many places exploring what the future of interaction could be. They have some really, really interesting explorations worth exploring and finding out. And there also is a GitHub account for them that has some goodies that you can kind of check out. So this is what we should be looking to, and we should be thinking about with what we create today. What if everything that we thought we knew about interfaces today was completely and totally wrong? Experiments like this one show what could be. They break down those boundaries, they color outside the lines. And that's what we really should be doing and looking at. The users of today also aren't not those of tomorrow. We can and we should run usability tests, but we also have to consider who is coming, what are the up and coming markets, what are their needs? Who aren't we serving today as an experience? This is where really looking into how accessible or diverse our experiences can be, that's where it matters. To grow as a platform, you need to look beyond those that you serve today. And the creators of today aren't those of tomorrow. In all of this, in the over-complexity and confusion, I have to kind of come back to, where are the future creators? How can someone learn to code, to design? Where in the sea is there a way for them to learn? Our processes are not inclusive. They have not only a barrier to learn, but also a hurdle to access. You have to know where is the right information. They are actually processes of privilege, and we have to be honest about that. How can a web truly for everyone be created when the system to create also isn't inclusive? When you have this disconnect and lack of diversity in those creating, you really ensure a fast track to products that also aren't inclusive. This bubble, these series of bubbles within bubbles, have created a system of privilege that applies not just to making the product, but using it and making it. It doesn't matter who you are or what level you are. The next solution might actually be something that you hold. Hierarchy, when focused on over-creativity, limits our growth to discovery. And as a project within WordPress, we have to leave room for these happy accidents and welcome everyone who may hold the secret and the idea that can move us forward. Because elitism really is the death of projects. And if we judge, we're going to limit that growth and we will become that 1%. The experience of today isn't natural for anybody to use. We've learned it's not natural. Users accept way too much than they should. We formed mental models around how we interact with products. And also we form mental models around how we should create. Understanding how really humans work gets you to a point of being able to understand what is natural. Just like looking outside of the bubble, looking into psychology and neurology to really understand how humans work is essential to creating the future. We only get there by really putting users at the heart of everything. Perfect, polished robots failed to take off as they were too perfect. Humans are imperfect. We have to understand that. We have to put users and their experience at the heart of everything. If we remove the human element, we remove growth, we remove connection, and we won't grow. The technology of today harms. To build a future, it needs to enable, empower, and break down barriers, not create them. And this ties in with all the previous points that I've shared. Too much today is gamified to the point it actually harms. Sticky to the point it sucks humanity from those interacting. And there is so much good that can come from technology. It just takes being brave to not follow the fastest path to clickbait. Experiences for good, I really truly believe, are the way forward because people aren't stupid and cynicism is growing in those that interact. The solution also isn't within WordPress. The future lies outside. Because what is WordPress today is not going to be WordPress tomorrow. The product you worked on today won't be the one you work on tomorrow. We need to look to art, look to science fiction. Look outside the daily work that you do and be open to all that the future could be. Dream and think beyond the confines of what your experience is today. Bravery doesn't come with limiting ourselves to this reality. You get to the future by visualizing it, by learning, by being open. What is WordPress needs to evolve, and it can evolve if we have that mindset. If it is a closed mindset, then what we have today is going to wither and not be around for long. Evolution of technology is natural, and we sometimes forget that when we look out and we don't look outside our bubble. Outside is where all the good stuff is going on, and how by doing this and looking outside and bringing that within to the work that we do, we can truly create a platform for the future. So my final brave thought is that the legacy of our technology matters. The future lies in less, not actually more. Recently, the race for technology has seen an kind of ignoring of the world around it. And this can't continue to go on. We really need to truly create experiences that connect, empower, and enable. They have to respect and not damage the space people inhabit. What we create today is the rubbish of tomorrow. The toxic digital waste that we will have to either clear or live around. We can do better. We can create with a mind that doesn't focus within the microchip, but on the space the person interacting inhabits. We can look outside the processor and really ensure the footprint, the digital legacy, isn't one that forces people to retreat into screens to escape the broken world. That is just as good for people as it is for the environment that they exist in. And these are brave thoughts about the future, about how we can maybe start together as a project within WordPress, as creators, and as those that want to create a better future. Let's think about what if, because that's how we move forward. When I was thinking about this talk, I wanted to create one just for this conference. And it's a luxury I was really grateful for. I had no limits on what I was speaking about, and that was really exciting. As I began writing this, I didn't realize I'd be not only writing a talk, but a promise to myself. You see, somewhere along the line, I also forgot to be brave, or as brave as I was before. I stopped sharing my sketchbook. That was the lesson I learned studying art, that you shared your work and you got feedback early. And somewhere along the line, I unlearned it. It all got too serious. It all became about work, about release. It all became too big. I stopped playing as much, and I stopped, if I'm honest, having as much fun as I was. In writing this talk, I got the luxury of a time to reflect, to remember, and I was given a space to just have some of those brave thoughts. And if I can leave you with just one point, I would encourage you to take that first step. Write that blog post of an idea, sketch that thought, create that experiment, build up the time in your own lab. I promise I'm going to do that, and I can't wait to see what everyone does when you're a little bit more brave. You can find me on Twitter and everything on that Comatose, and thank you. So we have the full question. Shall I answer the question now? So in the company of people where you are excluded basically because you are a designer, how does bravery play here? It's so difficult to be brave in a company like this. So first, going to recognize, yes, that's a very difficult space to be brave in. But I think this, if I dig a little bit deeper, this is part of what I was saying about we get very attached to titles, right? And territory. Then likely is a developer who can also design or who has the reach. You can get brave by starting those tiny little steps of meeting people on the bridge. And then you find out that you're not the only design person in that space. I also think by being in that space, you're being very brave as well. But it's by doing small things in that space. I do not believe categorically that every designer should code, but I do believe that if a designer wants to and a developer also wants to design, there's nothing wrong with that. And I think bravery is just by installing design thinking and activating. I kind of think about this as design infusion. So everybody who works on a product should have design infusion. They should be design aware of what they're creating. And that is anybody that's making a product as well. So I think sometimes we isolate design by giving it a role and then we segregate it. So therefore we segregate the work that we do. I hope that answers it all. I have no instant solution for you. I will just add, as a designer yourself in that space, I would encourage you to look outside that space for design support as well. Whilst you're trying to do all this amazing work, look for communities of practice, look for Slacks and communities that can really support you and grow you in that space. And from that, you find connections to kind of bolster that side. So it's a little bit, you don't always have to look within the company as well. So Lucas says, hi, Tammie, great talk, really inspiring. This is my question. Bravery often comes with a lot of criticism. Case in point is Gutenberg, which despite being a great product, initially got a lot of resistance from the community. If you were to do it all again differently, what would you, over again, what would you do differently?
That's an interesting question.
Yeah, I think that's a perspective, and I think everybody has a perspective on this. I think there's a phrase which is really flippant, but I'm going to share it, which is hindsight is something after, which I think is always the case when we look at something and we look at the past. We always analyze it much more than we analyze the work today. And I think we have to be a little bit careful of doing that when we do push boundaries on projects, because we think of like, what could we change? What could we do? We can take lessons, absolutely. So I think one of the big lessons I've taken in the past few years is communication. Another big lesson I've taken is also being okay about people experimenting. That's kind of where I am with this talk as well. I think I'm not going to speak for every single person in the community about what they should change. So I think it's a very personal thing. I would also add, I have one point as well. I think if we all have a bit of a mindset of bravery and supporting of feedback and supporting of experimentation, I think any change in the future is going to be easier for everybody. That's not saying that change is easy, because we're humans and our brains, but I just think if we start to give each other space to explore, that's kind of where I'm coming from with this Be Brave. We create a space where people do feel secure to do that, and where we are prepared for that to happen. There's two sides to that, right?
Yes, awesome. So thank you very much, Tammie. I absolutely loved your talk, and I look forward to seeing your slides too, so I can also DM you my questions. And then
thank you. Bye.
All right. Thank you, Tammie. Bye.